Hello and welcome back to the channel. Welcome to you if this is your first time. So let's jump right in and start building this cross that you saw there. I will be using scrap pieces of wood for this, but you can use a 1x2 board and just follow along with the process. The depth of the dado will be a little bit different. It will just be half of the width of a 1x2 board, which will actually be 3/4 inches. This is going to be a project that I do entirely on a miter saw. So the first thing I did was to set the depth gauge on the miter saw. If you don't have a depth gauge, then you might need to stack up pieces of wood to get the height that you need. In my case, the board is 1¼ inches thick and I need to cut that halfway. So I'm setting the height of the blade so that it'll cut just right to half of the board, because essentially we're trying to get a dado out of the board using the miter saw. And so what I did, I took a scrap piece of plywood and made a series of cuts until I got to the depth that I need. And my blade has angles on it, so it creates this V on the board. So you might need to clean that up once you're done with making the dado. Next, I'm going to measure and mark on the long piece where the dado should be. First of all, I marked the width of the horizontal arm of the cross, which is 7 inches. And then the visible height of the cross is 10½ inches tall. There's 3/4 inches of the vertical piece that will be inside the base of the cross. At this point, I want to quickly remind you that all you need is a little bit of faith and some action. Since the thickness of the board is 3/4 inches, I marked 3/4 inches at the center of each one of the boards that I will be cutting so that I can make the dado at that point. The depth of the cross is actually 1¼ inches, as you saw earlier. As I mentioned, the length of the cross is 10½ inches long, but I'll have 3/4 of it sitting inside the base. Next, I'm using this mini square to transfer those lines to the other sides of the board so that I can start making the dado cuts. I'll share a quick tip. It's a lot safer to use a long piece and make the 2 dado cuts, and then when you're done you cut it to the final length for the sides of the cross, rather than cutting it to the length and then trying to hold those short pieces against the blade. So just make sure you're keeping your fingers at a safe distance away from the blade. So I added the scrap piece of wood and a paint stick to offset the board so that the cuts are made right, or where the blade makes contact with the piece of wood that I'm making the dado on, the cuts are actually flat and not angled. I hope that helps and that makes sense. As you notice there, the cuts that I made were shy of where the mark is, because I want to make sure that I end up with a tight fit rather than a loose fit. And as you notice, I'm using one of the scrap pieces of 3/4 material to check the fitness of it. And once I got it, I went and did the other side of it, the longer part of the cross. And then it's just a matter of repeating the process to get the dado for the vertical piece. Now with both dados made, it's time to cut the cross to the width that it should be and put it together. All that's left now is to come up with the dimensions for the base. So I'm using a piece of board that is about the same width as the depth of the cross, which is 1¼ inches, and I'm going to cut that into half pieces to go on both sides of the base of the cross. So I've decided that the material that I have for the front of the base would be 6.5 inches long. So that's what I'm going with. I measured and marked that, and I'm going to cut it on the miter saw. Next, I'm just using my X-Acto ruler to determine the distance from the base of the cross to the end of the front of the base, and then I'm going to cut that on the miter saw. I'm going to cut 2 pieces, one for the left and the right side. Lastly, the back piece is also going to be 6.5 inches wide. So we'll measure and cut that also on the miter saw. Now for the first round of sanding. Now it's time for assembly using wood glue, mostly wood glue, and then when I was done I added a couple, 3 brad nails at the back just for added strength, but this glue is strong enough, there's no need, but just to be on the safe side. Now with the glue all dried, I added 3 2-inch brad nails to the back of the base. At this point we can just sand it off and we're done, and just leave it as rough as it is, but I'm using the wood filler there to fill up some of the gaps on the board. There's some spacing in between because some of the pieces of the board are actually warped. So I'm gonna let the wood filler dry up, and then I'll give it good sanding with that mini sander there in smoothing it out. It's a 60 grit sandpaper that I'm using, and then I'll take it onto the belt sander so that I can add bevel to the base of the cross. You can use a router to add the bevel if you have a router handy, but it's a lot easier for me on the belt sander, so I'm just using that. Besides, it's less tools, since I was going to use a belt sander to sand the bottom and the sides of the base anyway, so I just thought I could add a bevel there. Just using the belt sander and avoiding the need to pull out another tool. If you liked the video, remember to click on the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thank you. And that is it. It was a fun project. I hope you're inspired to make one like this, or as usual, probably a better one. So until next time, I hope you'll have a tangible experience of God's unconditional love today. Take care, my friend, and God bless you.